This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Hello and welcome back everyone to the X-Cast. The truth is in here. I'm your host Tony Black, and in this episode we're moving away from the TV screen to the video game screen, or maybe the PC monitor, or or the PlayStation.
To be fair, it's still a TV screen if you're playing it on a PlayStation.
It is. I was about to say the PlayStation PS1 monitor, because in this episode we're going back to the mid-90s, and not as I say, the X-Files at its prime, but the X-Files at its video game prime. Not really. The X-Files game. And joining me to talk about this is the most apt guest I think I could get on to discuss it. It's my old chum, Andrew Brooker.
Hello, mate.
You know what? It's been a while since we've been on the X-Cast together, actually. I think it's been the season 11 coverage, maybe. You did Ghoulie with me.
I did.
Yeah, that was the only one we did, because we did all of season 10 together, pretty much, and then we did Ghoulie. I didn't do all of them, to be fair, but we did do that one. So you're the only person I could think of really in terms of getting on to talk about this video game, and we're gonna record also one about at some point about Resist or Serve as well, which is the second one, but we'll get to that in another podcast. But for this one, it made sense because you are quite the video game connoisseur. You know your stuff. You've got your own podcast.
I mean, I like to think so. I have a podcast to try and convince people that I know what I'm talking about.
I'm convinced.
I haven't yet convinced myself, though. This is the problem.
And Character Unlock, which you mentioned when you've been on before, but if you're a fan of video games, then it's one to check out. So you've got form with video games, but this one I think has challenged your love of this medium. So
I think it's challenged my love of games, of the X-Files, of just life in general. So yeah, we're gonna try and do the usual thing with this. We're not going to talk in depth necessarily, like unpick each scene or anything like that. We're going to talk about the plot. We're going to talk about the characters. We're going to talk about, crucially, the experience of playing this X-Files FMV game, and then we'll see where the discussion takes us. So obviously this game was released in North America on May the 31st, 1998. In the EU, September 29th, 1998. On Windows, and then subsequently a PlayStation port came out in North America in October 13th, 1999, and the EU on January the 9th, 1999. So we got it in Europe before America. And it was developed by Hyperbole Studios, directed by Greg Roach, and written by Richard Dowdy and Greg Roach. Now, I know what you're thinking. Who, in the name of Donny Faster, are they, right? Now, we'll get to that. But in the X-Files FMV game, after Mulder and Scully vanish on a case in Washington State, Assistant Director Skinner assigns Agent Craig Wilmore of the Seattle Field Office to find them. Wilmore's investigation intertwines with Mulder's own, putting him on the trail of an alien craft that crashed in the Pacific, aliens trying to recover it, and a cover-up stemming from the government, the military, and even the Bureau itself. Now, that comes from the X-Files wiki. I think they're making it sound a lot more exciting than it probably is. So, Brooker, out of 10, what would you give the X-Files game? And be honest. Dude, it's tough, right? Okay, so the thing you have to realise is, if you don't play video games, it's not something that really occurs to you, but it's a bit like watching a movie. If you watch a movie from 20 years ago, and the CGI in it is terrible, if you make the same movie now, it's going to look completely different because the technology's evolved. And video games are the same. When I played this game first, it was
okay, it was probably still crap. I'll be honest, it was probably still crap, but it was nowhere near as crap as it was when I played it 3 weeks ago. An honest out of 10 would have to be, feeling generous, a 3. Dude, it's so bad.
I think I'd probably go for I think, you know what, I think I'd do sort of 2. I think I'd go in terms of like gameplay. Now I confess I played this years ago on the PC back when, you know, this came out in 98, so I was 16 and it was the height of X-Files, you know, mania. This was 98, 99. The X-Files Fight the Future was out, season 5, season 6. So, you know, I was really excited to get it, played it, everything like that. And I didn't play it now because time has passed. I couldn't get hold of a copy. And I watched it, basically. You know, on YouTube, the beauty of YouTube is that all of these old video games are pretty much on there so you can watch them. So I sat through... Boy, did I sit through watching this game be played. But you actually played it again. I was going to say,
I'm not letting you get any fucking sympathy for this.
No, exactly. Because you actually played them. So you actually played this game. So, you know, hats off, because that wouldn't be the fun. So my point is,
these games finished off my gaming challenge for the year, which makes me really sad.
Right. It's not the most auspicious one to end on. So from a gaming perspective, from what having watched the game play again and having remembered playing it, I would say yes, it's about a 3 or a 4. I think in terms of story, however, I'd say it's probably about a 6. Because this ultimately is a mythology episode. It's a kind of a lost mythology episode. Sort of and it actually fits quite well alongside things like Nisei and 731, Piper Maru and Apocrypha. You could pretty much slot it in, you know, and little bits of Talitha Kumi, you know, with the stiletto and things like that. You could kind of slot it in within the Mythark episodes of season 3, and it doesn't really miss much of a beat. But the problem is, the crucial key problem is, and this is probably the problem you found playing it and the problem you found watching it, you barely get any Mulder and Scully in a story which is about the X-Files.
Yeah, and there's this kind of, this air of the times that Gillian Anderson and David Duchovny are, let's say, on screen, there's this kind of feeling that they're basically waving a little flag saying, I'm only here because I'm contractually obliged to be here. And there's no... And I hate that I'm saying this about the X-Files. There's no soul in anything on that screen. No one cares. You know, I don't care. They don't care. Everything just seems completely heartless in this game. Nowadays, it would get beaten to a pulp if it was handed to critics. Nowadays, this game, it's not good.
Obviously, you know, the central conceit of it is that Mulder and Scully, you see them in the pre-credit sequence. Basically, they end up at this warehouse. A big flash of light, they disappear, and you've got a new character to follow it through. And the concept of the game is obviously that it was around the time you had things like Wing Commander, bringing this sort of FMV revolution of this combination. You know, the days where you had the CDs, where CDs were a real novelty. You had things like the Mega CD and, you know, console, and everything was being put on CD, and they were trying to blend the idea of a movie experience with a video game experience before they could have the graphics at the quality of now, where you get a game like the recently released, say, Red Dead Redemption 2, and it is like playing a movie. You know, you're actually properly playing a movie. Back then, they couldn't really do that. So it's a splice between the two, and FMV games haven't aged well.
No, it's worth realising actually that FMV games as a whole, there weren't that many, because they were quite expensive to make, because obviously it means filming actual people. And especially like for a game like the X-Files, filming several scenes several times in several different ways. And then you've got to get it into the game and, you know, dev around it. But the problem with FMV games is they tend to be... There are a few quite famous ones, and there's ones like Night Trap is one of the most famous ones, and it is famously terrible. The Seventh Guest, which is one of my favourites, which is also famously terrible, but I quite like it. It's a bit horror-y. It's all right, but it's not only that they didn't age well; they weren't good when they came out.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm not saying that from a bias. I remember these games being crap point of view. It was the technology was there, but it was never used quite right. It never felt like it was being used to its full potential, and the disconnect between gameplay and then straight into FMV. And you got to remember, when you're playing on a PlayStation, an original PlayStation, or a PC in '92, it doesn't look like video. It looks like a pirated movie that you're watching.
Yeah.
So call it full motion video all you want, it still looks ghastly, and it's not a good experience to play. It never was. Not even back, on release day, it wasn't a good experience to play.
Well, it was dubbed full motion video, as you say, is what FMV means. It was dubbed a technology called virtual cinema, but the idea is that it's essentially a point and click game, off the back of things like Monkey Island, and I think this was just after things like Grim Fandango, which are obviously animated, and they're like a million times better than this. But the idea is that you've got a cursor, you've got places and objects to interact with, and whereas in an animated game, a video game, you've got particular items or animated environments that look good and they fit with the aesthetic of the game. In this case, you've got real life photography, real life locations that have been filmed on, and you've got you've got them essentially as still pictures, which the cursor then influences. So it's whether it's somebody walking forward or walking into a building, picking something up, but there's no you're in first person, so you're always Wilmore and you're in first person, so there's no interaction where you see a character pick something up. It's just you click on it and they have a whatever it is, a file, and there's lots of stuff in it, like looking through case files and trying to. And famously, there was a report that you have to get into the guy's computer at the beginning with a password. And it was so difficult for people to find the password to get into this game. They had to actually call the helplines and say, we can't even get into the computer that allows us to access like the PDA that allows us to go to another location. Like, what do we do? And they thought the solution was easy. Oh, it's on his pin board in his office. You can, and everyone was like, no, it's not easy. This, what are you doing? And this is the kind of thing. So it quite quickly, I think, alienated a lot of people with all this very, staccato gameplay, spliced with, like you say, the cutscenes are diabolical. A lot of them are really, even the characters who from the show, even they aren't on their best game, are they?
No, they're really not, and you really want them to be as well, because there is, if you can suspend your disbelief for just a little bit, you can quite get into the story. And I did when I played. I started and read through all the case files and all that guff, and kind of I fell back into I'm playing an X-Files game. This is great, and then you click on a thing and have to talk to Skinner, and because of the way it's made, he comes out like a stuttering moron.
Yeah. The problem is that you can tell that these actors are reading from material that is. The difference is when you've got characters like, loads of people are in this. You've got Skinner, you've got X, you've got the Lone Gunman, you've got very briefly the Smoking Man. But they're obviously reading dialogue, which is meant to forward the plot as opposed to actually be a beat of characterization. It's the same when you do eventually, spoilers, meet up with Mulder and Scully, because you do in the end. But they are, especially David Duchovny's barely in it. Gillian Anderson maybe gets slightly more to do, but they are really bored with what they're, and like you said, it's a contractual thing. But there's no inflection in it. So the cutscenes and the story, while on a technical point is interesting, in terms of actually engaging you and bringing you into it and making you feel like this is a really interesting X-File, I don't think that's the case.
Ironically, actually, a game like this, or a story like this, sorry, not the game, because the less said about the actual game, probably the better. But the story in this game would translate very well into a game now made by, let's say, not anymore, but Telltale Games.
Yeah.
Like so obviously, like Telltale, they've done things like Sam & Max and Back to the Future, and more recently done Walking Dead and Wolf Among Us. Real point and click games in the spirit of like those old LucasArts games, like you mentioned, Grim Fandango and Full Throttle, games like that, and Monkey Island. They did Monkey Island, and it would work very well if it was made by these people that, frankly, cared about the game they were making.
Yeah.
But had the skills to put a story together and make it fluid, which is something that the X-Files game, it did have this issue where nothing felt fluid. Everything felt like it was almost snapped in. Like you could make it felt like a choose your own adventure book that someone was slapping you in the face with the pages.
Yeah. No, it does. And it's surprising in a way. I mean, I think it comes down to execution. You know, we mentioned earlier the writers, Richard Dowdy, Greg Roach, and who also directed it. But Frank Spotnitz was quite involved as well, you know, and the story ultimately came from Chris Carter and Frank Spotnitz. You know, it's one of those things that they were always involved, you know what I mean? They would have had a level of creative control. Because, there's a really interesting article about this, and I will have to try and find... I was sent it by one of our patrons, and it's a really, really great article that goes through the entire making process of this game. And there's some really fascinating, interesting stuff in it. It's quite a long article, and it's talking about how this is all put together. And, you know, there's a really interesting backstory to it. And the fact is, they wanted this game to be really good. You know, they wanted it to feel like a Lost Mythology episode. They wanted it to kind of slot it in. You know, canonically, it's set between Avatar and Wet Wired, because you see the date, it's like April 1996. So it takes place after Piper Maru and Apocrypha. You know, and it fits because obviously you get the black oil back in, and even though I don't think necessarily this is canon, you know, it's necessarily a canon piece, it does fit in, and you think to yourself, okay, it's got some really, really interesting ideas in terms of the story. But I think the problem is you want a game, you want it to feel like you're in an episode. And did you ever feel really like you were in an episode of the X-Files and had that immersion?
Not really, no.
Exactly, because this is where it kind of and I mean, were they ever going to be able to do that with FMV?
No, it's not. Like I said, it's not something that's just in that kind of game. It's not possible, and this is something that still happens a lot now as well. It's a tie-in. It's a tie-in game. You know, we've had it. X-Men games have been made. You know, every time an X-Men film has come out, there's been a game for it. Spider-Man's the same, to varying degrees of not very good. You know, I know that this game wasn't thrown out just to tie in with the movie that was on its way in between seasons and things like that. But it was, like you say, it came out at the height of everybody loving the X-Files. So it felt like it was rushed out as quick as they possibly could, and no care and attention was put into the building of this game. And it feels awful. I say similar things when I tear into a film. I can't do this either. I can't make games. I can't make films. But the difference is, I don't try.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, the thing is, I don't think there's anything wrong with if you're a fan of something, being able to criticise it even though you haven't made it. You know, it's the common defence with like filmmakers. Oh, you try making a film, you try making a game. Well, it's not that. You know, if you put a product out, you've got to be prepared for opinion. What's the point in making it if you don't want to know what people think? And if people
exactly, if you want me to pay for something,
right, exactly,
you best make it worth me paying for.
Yeah. And
I'm not saying I paid to play this game recently. I did find an emulator to play it on because I was not going to pay for it.
No, you wouldn't now. I mean, because, you know, gaming has evolved so much. Logically, if there was an X-Files... And there's talk of X-Files games coming to, you know, into existence still. You know, there was recent talk about one. But, you know, they're very, very seldom and few and far between. And I don't think we've ever really had a definitive X-Files game that really stands up. But
not really, no.
No.
The mobile one recently was about as crap as this one. Actually, I didn't mind the mobile one, to be fair. I did play it as I've got 10 minutes, you know, everyone's out, I'm going to go for a crap. I'm going to play my game at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the one that Creative Mobile did is fun in that context. It's not going to be something you you take on as a proper video game experience. It is like you say, you've got 10 minutes spare. I'll just get on my phone and do that. It's a very different kind of thing. In that context, it's fine. It's not groundbreaking, but it's fine. But with something like this, you're paying back then. You're paying a decent amount of money.
Well, yeah, you're still paying 50, 60 quid for a game. The same amount you're paying now, but you're expected to carve out quite a significant chunk of time to play this game. I think I sped through this with a guide on my iPad next to me, and it still took me about 5-6 hours to play.
Yeah, because you've got quite a lot of the thing with it is the thing that I remember, and I watching it back, I was struck by is there's a lot of back and forth. There is a lot of going back to one place to get a little piece of information that takes you to another place that gives you an artifact, or you go and speak to somebody, you go back to another person, you have another conversation with them, and there's a lot of until you can unlock the next thing. Whereas in this day and age, modern video gaming is, you've obviously got an entire world at your disposal, and you choose where to go. You plan it out. You don't feel like you've got to laboriously keep going back and keep going back and keep going back in order to unlock the next bit.
And the games that do make you do that don't make any money.
No, exactly. But the really good ones, the ones that people remember and the ones that stick in the mind, do. And the difference with the point and click games of the past, which didn't have that, but they did well and they were successful, like some of the ones I've mentioned, is you were engaged in the story. The scripting was really good. It was funny. It was the puzzles were involving and interesting and often infuriating. I mean, I'll never forget. I don't know if you've ever played Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis.
I have.
Oh, that bloody snake on the tree. If anyone's played that game, you'll know what I mean. That absolute bastard.
Yeah.
It took me ages. But there's nothing in this. I don't think there's anything in this, and do correct me, given you've played it recently, but there's nothing in this that I would have found to be a frustrating but enjoyably frustrating challenge, as opposed to being, just please let me move on to the next bit because this is doing my head in.
Yeah, no, there's the thing, especially in puzzle games. Again, Indiana Jones, Grim Fandango is my go-to. I love Grim Fandango. And there's when you find a stupid puzzle and you solve it, and there's this amazing sense of accomplishment, and it feels like you've progressed something. You've progressed the story. You've figured out an amazing puzzle. Have you played Grim Fandango?
Yeah, it's been a few years now, but I loved it. Yeah.
When you somehow have to figure out how to tear a ship in half with its anchor, mate, that took me hours.
Hours, yeah, definitely.
Hours of clicking on things, and Monkey Island's the same, but rubbing two things together to see what happens.
Yeah.
And Grim Fandango took me hours to it, but when you got it, two things happened. One, you had this amazing sense of relief, and you went, yes, I've done it, now I can crack on. And secondly, you went, oh, for crap's sake, really?
Yeah.
Really, that was it.
Yeah.
And there's none of that. There's nothing in the X-Files game that makes you proud of what you've accomplished.
And that's surely the point. That's surely the point of a video game. What's the point in the idea of a video game unless what you get out of it is this real sense of euphoria and this sense of achievement and this sense of being able to figure out how it can be anything from a first-person shooter to a point-and-click adventure. It's about figuring out how to immerse yourself and get through it.
You need to have a sense of something. It doesn't necessarily need to be accomplishment. It can be relief that you finished the game.
Yeah.
Mate, the amount of games I've finished, and when I was a kid, I never thought this would be a thing, but the amount of games I've played and finished have left me literally in tears at the end. An emotional connection with my game. A sense of anything that isn't frustration and boredom. If I've got to the end of a game and I'm nothing but frustrated, bored, and pissed off with your game, you've failed as a game maker. And if your purpose is to piss me off, then you've done very well. But I don't see why you would want to do that to me.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. It has potentially interesting ideas. Like one of the things that it never comes across. There's one thing called Uber variables that they were called at the time, which is that certain decisions made by the player can set them on one of three tracks. So either paranoia, so Wilmore starts to see things like twitching corpses and shadowy figures. Loss, so when he gets messages from his ex-wife, they're kinder. Or something called the X track, where you learn more details about the myth arc and things like that. And there are certain paths you can take in the game where it can. Wilmore has this growing sort of romantic relationship with his version of the Scully, Mary Astadorian, who's a Seattle Police Department detective, named after one of Chris Carter's staff. Actually, it was a nice little in-joke. But even though some of these things happen, and there's quite a bit of fun in seeing all the alternative sort of deaths. Especially at the end, there's lots of little roads you can go down. When if you watch it on YouTube, you can actually see all the different ways people die and things like that. And it's quite fun because they did film various different things. But you still don't feel like you're immersed in and when you're watching a really good episode of the X-Files, you are intrigued, but you're also excited and you're thrilled, and you feel like there's some development for the characters and things like that. In this case, you don't feel that with Craig Wilmore. But by the end, there's no real desire to see that character again. You don't really feel like he's done anything except fill in a couple of tiny little gaps that you don't need to know in order to understand the mythology. And that, I think, is a missed opportunity, especially if you've got video, and you've got this outlet. Why not do something that really does feel like, if you don't play this game, you are going to miss a key part of this entire puzzle. And they didn't really do that.
No, I think the problem they've got is... So the thing with Craig Wilmore as a character, so I think his purpose is twofold. One, he takes the place of a character or of an actor or actress that they couldn't get in to do the job. So Gillian Anderson and David Duchovny, very busy. They have lives and other things to do. And height of the X-Files, they were both doing a lot of stuff when they weren't filming X-Files episodes.
Yeah.
So they've got somebody else into it. But they've also tried to do it so that you're not trying to be, or you're not trying to play as Mulder or Scully. They're trying to make Wilmore, let's call it a faceless avatar for you. So it's you playing the game. It's you in the story. And the unfortunate thing about that is, I don't think a single person playing an X-Files game wanted that.
Exactly what I was going to say. Right? On the one hand, yes, okay, you understand the idea that yes, okay, you're playing as somebody who is being dropped into this world and things like that. But if you were going to do that, do it like in this day and age where you can literally create someone from scratch. If you want to create Andrew Brooker, Special Agent Andrew Brooker, you can do that. You create that kind of, you put the name in and everything like that, and you feel like you're immersed into it. Whereas that's one way to go with it. But yeah, who wants to play an X-Files game unless you're Mulder or Scully? It's bonkers. It's absolutely bonkers. And I suppose their thinking is, okay, well, if it's first person, you're not going to see either of them throughout the game. But who cares? Like you're playing. If you feel like you're Mulder or you feel like you're Scully, that in itself is a sense of excitement. Surely.
Yeah, that's the thing you want. If you're playing a game in first person, oh geez, I'm Mulder. This is badass. You feel like an absolute badass.
Yeah, you will do.
You get to be Fox Mulder for a few hours. This is great. This is what games are supposed to be.
Yeah, you don't. But in this, you're a random guy who never is going to be seen again, who you've never seen before, you've never heard of, who spends the whole game looking for the two characters that you're interested in the first place. And then when he reaches them, it's such a damp squib. It's such an anticlimax that you go, oh, okay, fine. And it's just, considering that the shooting script for this was nearly 750 pages, that 6 hours of footage was filmed. It cost $6 million over 4 years. Like, how did you end up with this at the end of it? I mean, that being said, it did well. Like, it was a commercial success.
This is the problem, though, isn't it? Because when it comes to things like the X-Files or any big property like that, fans will spend the money. And you see this a lot now, and you see it a lot now with things like Twitter and Facebook. Someone says, "Don't buy the latest." Anything. Don't buy the Walking Dead game. It's absolute garbage.
Yeah.
And all you'll get is a sea of people going, it's not made for critics, it's made for fans. So fans will buy it and we will play it.
Yeah.
So every fan will buy it.
Yeah.
The game will make a shit ton of money. It will still be crap, but they'll get another one because everybody bought the bastard thing.
Which, to some extent is what happened with the X-Files, but we'll get to get to Resist or Serve, which is a very different beast another time. But before we go, we have actually got some listener feedback as well. When we asked people in the XCast basement group, did you play the X-Files game? And if you did, what did you think? So John McKellar says the first game is okay for what it is. What it is, though, is a mediocre and pedestrian point-and-click game with bad acting from the leads. Duchovny and Anderson also put zero effort into their guest appearances, and it shows. The only two people who even bothered to phone it in that you'd expect anything from were Mitch Pileggi and Stephen Williams. The plot's all right as well. Would have been a decent episode of the show. I think that's kind of what we've been saying, Brooker, isn't it, really? That the acting's poor, but the story actually has some merit.
Yeah, and this is a tie-in novel. Or it's a bonus episode for the DVD extras.
Yeah.
It's not a game. It doesn't deserve to be on a PC or a PlayStation.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. James Leggett says, now he's talking kind of, I think, about the second game as well, but it works in this case. You know, it's okay. It would be nice if it got a re-release on Steam, but I think it would have been more successful if it had been a Monster of the Week story instead, giving gamers who weren't familiar with the X-Files a chance to get interested and not get confused. Now, that's an interesting point, isn't it? Because, you know, if you're selling a game off this IP, but, you know, there's going to be lots of video gamers who not necessarily you want to appeal to, who may not have watched all the X-Files, who may not be as up on the mythology. Are you shooting yourself in the foot by making this, you know, the Lost Myth Arc episode of Season 3?
Yeah, I think there's merit in what he's saying. The thing is... and like we said, we're saying that with the height of X-Files, the height of the X-Files being the X-Files was everywhere. Developers and publishers basically banked on fans buying it. If every fan, or if every other fan bought a copy of this game, the game was going to be successful. If everybody that had zero interest in the X-Files or had never seen an episode before then didn't, it wasn't going to be a problem. It's basically a game... It's not made for fans. Don't for a second think that's what I'm saying. It's a game made to be sold to fans.
Yeah. This is it, and it's very clearly that, you know.
Yeah. It's very cynical on Fox's part.
Oh yeah.
Having a game created that way, but that's how it makes money, and that's how game publishers make money.
No, absolutely, yeah. Mora Funchen says, I remember playing the game, the first game on my compact desktop in my dorm room during freshman year of college. I enjoyed it, but I'm not sure I ever managed to finish it, sadly. But then again, I think it's the only computer game I've played other than SimCity and Myst. You're probably better off with them, quite honestly, to be honest, than bothering with this.
But I think that probably just makes my previous point now, doesn't it? These are games for people that don't necessarily play other games.
Yeah.
But they're X-Files fans.
Right, and that's the case with that fellow host and old mate, Sarah Blair, who says, I remember being so excited to get all those discs for the first game and play them on my Gateway computer. I don't even know what that is. You might, I don't know.
Yeah.
Dear, what's that? What's a Gateway?
It's just, it's an old, it's not Amiga level. I'll tell you what, let me get this thing up. Yeah.
Is this old? Is this old even for us? Like old? Are you showing?
It's not old even for us. No.
Are you showing your age here, Blair? Is that what's happening?
Right, here we go. Oh God, Gateway. Oh my God. So these are one of those where you might remember these, just you don't remember you remember them, or you don't realise you remember them. Right. Gateway, their logo was basically cow.
No,
it wasn't a cow. It was just black and white splodges. Like a cow.
You meant it was a cow?
No, and it always stuck out to me. Gateway, like the last few years that Gateway was a company, their logo was literally, it was like a cube, but it was cow coloured.
Oh my God!
It's just a PC.
Okay,
it's just a PC.
Okay, PC. That explains it then. Okay, she carries on. I never really played the games other than Super Mario Brothers, so I thought videos and the whole experience was really cool. I was so happy just to get my hands on more X-Files, she says. I didn't care much about the quality because I didn't have anything to compare it to. I think I made it to the end, but I can't remember. One scene that stands out was the first part in the hallway in the FBI building, and another scene at a warehouse in Seattle, maybe? I remember X showing up at one point. I was only playing to get to more Mulder and Scully, but it was fun. And I suppose that kind of sums it up, really, doesn't it? It's that whole... you know, Sarah was not a gamer. She isn't a gamer as far as I know now, but she played it because she was a fan, and she got something out of it because she was a fan. And in that sense, much as it is poor, then, you know,
mission accomplished.
Yeah, you know, and that's maybe that's the whole point. Maybe that's
it sadly it is. I know it's cynical of it's cynical of me to say it like that. I've seen it so many times, not just with the X-Files, but pretty much with any IP that has a decent, relatively vocal fan base. And the X-Files is, even all these years later, is one of the biggest. You know, I would wager that Star Trek Bridge Crew sold more PlayStation 4s and PlayStation VR headsets than almost anything else, based simply on the fact that you got to play on the bridge of the Starship Enterprise.
Yeah,
you know,
almost.
And
certainly.
I don't mean that in a disparaging way to Star Trek fans, even a little bit. But that's just the way these games are made.
No,
and that's how they're made, and it's what they're made for.
You're right. I was at the Destination Star Trek convention a few weeks ago, and they had Bridge Crew. They had about 3 or 4 consoles, and they had Bridge Crew playing on a loop, and you couldn't get on them. They were packed every single minute of every single day. It was people who just wanted that experience. So you're spot on, and that's exactly what it is. People buy IPs. They buy things for IPs.
The only people that know Bridge Crew is a thing. My brother wants to play Bridge Crew. He only knows that Bridge Crew is a thing because he's a Star Trek fan.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
yeah.
He's got no idea about any other game that's out on PlayStation VR. To be fair, Bridge Crew has now been made so that you can just play it on PS4. You don't need the VR to do it anymore.
Ooh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
So if you have a PS4, just go out and get yourself a copy of Bridge Crew. You can play it. Apparently it's quite good.
Ooh.
I've never played.
That's what I'm doing tomorrow. Good lads. I didn't know that. How exciting.
Well, you know what, mate? Let me know if it's any good, and if it's decent, I'll rent a copy and I'll come play it with you, because you need friends to play it with.
Good plan.
But yeah, but he doesn't know any other games on PSVR, apart from the ones I've shown him, because he's got no interest generally in games. But what he does have an interest in is Star Trek. And of course, you only got to be on any old Star Trek forum or any Star Trek subreddit, and someone will be talking about the Star Trek game. Yeah. And that's no different to what happened with the X-Files game here.
It's true. That's absolutely true. It's all about the IP, really.
I'm the fucking Victor Meldrew of video game podcasters. I hate this.
I don't believe it, Brooker, for a minute.
I genuinely love video games, and almost all video games I will play and adore, but sometimes you just see these games and you go, you absolute bastards.
Look, you can be forgiven for not loving this, because ultimately it's not good. It's not a great game. It has elements to it that are enjoyable. It's certainly, in terms of the story, it's pretty good. In terms of seeing the main characters of the show, yes, a lot of them are there. But in terms of an actual experience, it is wanting, and it's a shame. But, you know, it exists. You can still get hold of it. You used an emulator to do it. If you only want to watch it, it's all on YouTube, right? All you got to do is type in the X-Files game, and you'll find all these walkthroughs. I mean, you're going to need a few. You're going to need a while, all right? So, you know, queue them up, because they're a good hour or more, and there's quite a few of them. I think it's half a day's viewing. So,
to be fair, that's probably, if you're not interested in playing the game or finding a way to emulate it on your PC or whatever, it's probably the best way to do it. It's on YouTube, and just have it on in the background while you do paperwork. Yeah. Or, you know, just have it playing on your phone while you're cleaning the house or something.
Because in that sense, it's actually not that intrusive. It's actually fairly background, and it's just a lot of clicking mostly, and a few voices here and there. So it might actually be quite good as a background thing. So that might be your best bet, really, because, you know, it's 2018, well, 2019 when you're listening to this, I think. Who's got the time? Who's got the time to be playing this game anymore? Right.
Hold on, it's 2019. I'm still playing Red Dead Redemption 2 because I haven't found the time to finish it yet. Yeah.
And what am I talking about? I'm saying, who's got the time to play an X-Files game? Who am I talking to? I'm talking to X-Files fans. Of course they've got the time, right? What am I even talking about? They're going to turn around and go, of course I've got the time, Tony. It's the X-Files. Yeah, fair enough. Well, so yeah, there you go. It's been an experience. We're going to be back at some point in the future to talk about Resist or Serve, the next X-Files game. But Brocco, it's been great to have you on to talk about this with me, and you know, you've earned it. You've paid your dues here. So it's like,
dude, it's always a pleasure to come on and podcast with you. You know that.
I know, it's lovely. It's lovely to do it with you. So until you're back on with me next, talking about whatever it will be, where can people find you, and what are you up to?
People, the best place to come find me would be on Twitter. As always, I'm Brooker411 on Twitter. I generally bitch and moan, but I try to be a bit lighthearted and funny about it, unless something really gets to me. I suppose from a video game perspective, we're talking about video games. Every other week I do a podcast with one of my favourite people in the world, and we just sit and talk about what's happened in the news recently with video games, what we've been playing. Sadly, I rarely talk about X-Files games on the podcast. I did a few months ago when I played these. I then spent I spent about 20 minutes, I suppose, kind of talking about them.
Ranting, I think, is the word.
I definitely ranted about them. They made me angry. But if you're interested in just basically chat like this, it's completely informal. It's structured only in as much as at some point we have to talk about the news, and at some point we have to talk about what we've been playing. So the rest of it, we've been known to go on complete tangents about work and life and kids, and video games are just the excuse we have to sit and talk to each other. So, but yeah, that's my podcast. It's Character Unlock on pretty much any podcatcher ever.
We'll be back soon. All the details of where we are and where you can find us will be in the credits. But remember, until next time, as always, thanks for listening, and trust no one. The Xcast, an X-Files podcast, is produced and presented by Tony Black, alongside a dedicated group of podcasters and X-Files fans. You can find us on Twitter at The Xcast, and on Facebook if you type in The Xcast, or at our group, X-Files Basement, an Xcast podcast fan group, where you can continue the discussion about all things Mulder and Scully. If you want to support The Xcast further, you can now subscribe and become a patron of the show on Patreon. On Google, just type patreon.com/The Xcast. That's Patreon. You'll see all of our tiers, subscription options and perks, which include early access to episodes, bonus content such as commentaries on X-Files episodes, access to a patron chat zone, and even appearing on one of our patron roundtable discussions. We would appreciate any support you can give the show, so just go to patreon.com/The Xcast to find out more. Our title music is provided courtesy of Will A, who you can find on Twitter at IamWillAYE.